They were still arguing about me in the other room when I closed the banking app and moved the money. It wasn't loud arguing, they never were, but it was enough for me to hear my name tossed around like a coat no one wanted to wear. Petty, oversensitive, difficult. I just stared at the balance one last time, breathed through my teeth, and pressed transfer. I'm Mary Carson, 72. And that was the moment I knew they never saw me as anything more than a complication. Subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Thanks. They had no idea what I'd just done. They thought I was still in the dark, that I still believed the smiles, the good morning pecks on the cheek, the weekly schedule they printed out like I was a toddler who needed structure. They'd put me in the downstairs room last spring when the knees got bad, saying it would be easier for me. It wasn't about ease. It was about keeping me out of sight, about shrinking me. The decision had been made long ago. I just hadn't caught up to it. Not until that evening when I overheard her voice floating through the thin hallway. It always started the same way. She said, "I just don't think she appreciates what we're doing." He replied something about sacrifices. Their life was so busy. Their finances so tight, it was getting too much, wasn't it? Too much. Me. It wasn't even what they said that hollowed me out. It was the tone. It's that casual disinterest. Appliance that won't quite fit in the new kitchen. So I walked out onto the back porch with a blanket over my lap, sat in the cold air and let my breath fog up the night. My tea had gone cold. My name still lingered in their mouths. I realized then fully, quietly, that I'd become the thing they whispered about. Not the woman who raised him. Not the woman who paid the down payment on this very house. The woman who buried his father with dignity and kept him in school with 2 jobs and a stitched-up coat. I wasn't sad. Not exactly. It just felt like something had finally settled. Like the truth had been walking toward me for years and had finally arrived, suitcase in hand, and then I reached for my phone. Not to call anyone, not to cry to an old friend. I opened the banking app, the joint account I had opened when I first moved in when they insisted it would make things easier. I looked at the balance, looked at my name next to theirs, and I thought, what if I just didn't wait for the next betrayal? What if I made this the last one? So I moved the money, inheritance left from my sister who died believing I was cared for. I moved it into a private account they didn't know existed. One I opened 6 months ago after my daughter-in-law forgot to give me my medication for 2 days. That was the real start of the unraveling, I think. When I realized my comfort was an afterthought, when I heard her tell the pharmacist on speakerphone, "Oh, she doesn't really need that many refills. She barely remembers to take them." That day, I began writing things down, quietly. Every prescription, every insult, every time they laughed. After I left the room, I began keeping receipts, screenshots, conversations saved in little voice notes, like breadcrumbs out of a forest. But I hadn't done anything with it. Not until the arguing. Not until I heard the word petty come out of my own son's mouth. I moved the money, then I deleted the app. I didn't cry. I just put the phone in my lap and watched the last of the tea, steam float away like breath I'd been holding for years, inside. They were still talking. They thought I couldn't hear. They thought I was still waiting to be loved the way I had. Given love, they thought I was afraid to be alone, but I wasn't. Not anymore that night. I slept with the door locked and the keys in my pocket. And for the first time in a long while, I slept all the way through. I wasn't always this quiet. There was a time when I filled a house with warmth, with noise. I used to hum while making breakfast, sing off-key while folding laundry, laugh. Too loud at sitcoms late at night. I knew what love sounded like. I made it out of thin air when we had no money. Made it out of patience when no one else showed up. My husband died in his sleep 15 years ago. No grand exit. Just a long exhale on a Wednesday morning in April. I made the arrangements alone, wrote the eulogy myself. Our son was still finding himself back then, still changing jobs, chasing titles, buying furniture on credit, and acting like a man. I gave him time. I gave him the car. Said, "Take your time settling down. There's no rush to be responsible. Thought I was giving him freedom. Didn't realize I was teaching him how to take. Back then, I still believed love returned. I believed that if you gave without keeping score, the world would one day wrap its arms back around you. I believed that when the time came, your children would become the hands that once held them. That they'd look at you and remember everything. The scraped knees, the packed lunches, the soft midnight rocking when the world got too big. I thought memories would turn into loyalty. But I was wrong. When I moved into their home 2 years ago, it wasn't because I was falling apart. My knees were weaker. Yes, my balance not what it used to be. But I was still driving, still cooking, still walking my little garden in the back of the church where no one else bothered with the roses. I moved in because they insisted. They said it would bring us closer, that the grandchildren would love having me near, that I'd never have to be alone. I was touched. I believed them. I sold the little house I'd held on to for decades. The same one where he took his first steps. The one with the creaky front step he used to leap from, like it was a mountain. I sold it and gave them most of the money. For upgrades, she said. To finish the kitchen. We'll add a railing to the front. Porch for you. It'll be yours too. I should have known when the railing never came. They gave me the downstairs room. Said it was convenient. It's closer to the laundry, the fridge, the door, but it also meant I didn't see much daylight. The window faced the side of a fence. I heard them walk above me every day, feet thudding in patterns that never invited me. I would hear the kids laughing, then hushed, then doors shut. Birthday parties held upstairs. I was told later. It was just a small thing. You wouldn't have liked the noise. I stopped cooking. The kitchen was always being cleaned, always in. Use always full of reasons I wasn't needed in it. I tried making tea one evening and she looked at the mess of one tea bag in the sink like I'd smashed a plate. I learned to use the electric kettle in my room. I bought instant coffee and drank it cold when they took the microwave away. It was a fire hazard. I kept quiet. I told myself it was adjustment, that families had friction, that maybe I was too sensitive. I kept remembering the day I moved in, the way she hugged me with one arm and called me Mama, even though she never had before. I thought that meant something, but it faded fast, like steam off a mirror. Warm 1 second, gone the next. My son changed too. He used to call me after work when he was single. Long drives where he'd talk about his boss, the stock market, the soup he burned by accident. He used to ask me what I thought. He used to laugh at my stories, but now he only asked if I'd taken my pills, if I'd closed the back door. I remembered not to touch the thermostat. I became a task, not a person. Some days I heard them talk about me like I wasn't there. She'd mention how I didn't clean up after myself, though I wiped everything twice. He'd say I was forgetful, that I repeated myself, that maybe we should talk about assisted care someday. They made it sound like a kindness. I remember the first time I cried in that room. It wasn't a big thing. 'Twas the way she corrected me at the dinner table. I'd misremembered the name of a restaurant from years ago. She laughed too long. He joined in. The kids looked down. I excused myself early. I cried because it hit me. They liked that version of me. The one who forgot. Things the one they could outsmart, outtalk, outpace. It made them feel bigger. And I let it happen. I let them write the story. I kept erasing myself to keep the peace. I wanted to be needed, so I shrunk. But dignity has a sound. It's very quiet. A rustle of paper, a breath in the dark, a thought. You whisper to yourself when no one else is listening. That's when I started writing things down. That was 6 months ago. A notebook I tucked behind the dresser. Passwords, dates, little quotes. The way she looked at me when I asked to join them at the movies. The way he said, maybe next time, and never asked again. I didn't know then what I would do with it all. I just knew I needed to remember who I was, and I needed proof for myself that I hadn't imagined this. Because if you're not careful, they'll convince you your hurt is fiction, that your fading is your fault. and I wasn't ready to. Disappear, not yet. The proof came slowly, like drips from a leaking faucet. Nothing dramatic, no shouting or slamming doors. It's just quiet things, forgotten things. Details that didn't line up when I paid attention. The day I found the unsigned check on the kitchen counter was when I started to look closer. It was made out to the home improvement store, folded neatly next to a receipt. The date was old, 2 weeks earlier, and the handwriting looked just like mine, only it wasn't. I hadn't written a check in months. They said everything was digital now. I wasn't allowed near the accounts, just told not to worry about the bills. But there it was, sitting like a warning someone forgot to hide. I picked it up, held it close. My hands started to tremble. They had copied my signature, not perfectly, but enough that it made me feel like I didn't own my own name anymore. I put it back where I found it, didn't say a word. Just returned to my room and sat with the notebook open on my lap, writing slower than usual. I didn't know what it meant yet, but I knew what it felt like. It felt like trespassing. Not into a house, into me. Later that week, I asked her casually about the porch railing again. She said the budget was tighter than expected, that unexpected things had come up, that we were all making sacrifices. That word had started to lose meaning. The next morning, I called the bank while she was out with the children. I used the landline quietly. I told the woman on the other end I needed to check something on my joint account. I asked about recent checks. The woman hesitated, asked me to verify my security question. I did. Then she listed the last 3. Transactions, all of them large, all of them signed in my name. None of them made by me. When I asked for copies, the woman on the phone hesitated again. Then she said softly, "Would you like to speak to someone in our fraud department?" I said no, not yet. I hung up the phone and sat in the chair by the cold window, watching a squirrel dig around in the dead leaves outside. Everything felt still. My hands were still. My mind wasn't. I thought back to a time years ago when I told my son never to lie on his college forms. He'd wanted to write something that would improve his chances. I remember saying, "What you get by lying, you'll have to live with in silence." He had rolled his eyes, told me everyone did it. And now, here we were. It's strange. You raise a child with love, and then one day you wake up and realize they've become fluent in betrayal. And you don't even know where they learn the language. I stopped eating dinner at the table. I told them my stomach was sensitive, that I was tired, that I preferred to eat earlier. They didn't push. Maybe they were relieved. One less plate. One less awkward silence. One less reminder that I was still here. But I was watching every whisper, every casual comment. Every time they said things like, "She doesn't really use her phone much," or "She doesn't understand online banking." They were planting seeds. In me, in the world around me. Building a version of me that could be dismissed, forgetful, vague, old, end. Maybe I was getting old. I don't deny it. My knees hurt. My memory skipped some names. But I was still aware, still here, still sharp where. It counted. I made copies of the statements when the mail came one day and no one was home. I scanned them on the old printer they forgot I knew how to use. I emailed them to myself, saved them on a USB drive I kept in a sock rolled tight inside a winter boot under my bed. I started reading about power of attorney, about asset protection, about what happens when people call you incompetent. It felt like reading about someone else, some woman in a movie who was being slowly replaced by the air around her. But it was me. I began to remember smaller moments that hadn't made sense at the time. Like when I had asked where my sister's necklace went, the one with the blue stone I planned to give my granddaughter, and she said it must have gotten lost during the move. Or when I asked why the life insurance paperwork I left on the counter disappeared before I could mail it. It was all small, all deniable. But it added up. Every act was like a thumb pressing down on my edges, trying to flatten me. And for a while I let them, because I was afraid of where I'd go, afraid of being alone, afraid of starting over at 72, with brittle knees and a heart that didn't beat quite as boldly anymore. But then, I realized something. I was already alone. I was surrounded by people, and still, I was alone. So what exactly was I clinging to? The illusion. The hope that they'd wake up one day and say, "We're sorry, we see you now." No, that day wasn't coming. Not from them. And that was the moment something broke loose inside me. Not a scream. Not even a sob. Just a quiet sense of being finished. Like a page turned without needing to be read again. I looked around that small basement room, the one they called mine. The mattress that sank too deep. The lamp with a flickering bulb. The tiny calendar she put on the wall with birthdays marked. In pen, none of them mine. And I said to myself softly, "You don't have to stay where you're shrinking." I didn't know where I was going yet, but I knew. Wouldn't let them keep my name. Not on paper, not in memory, not in guilt. There's a quiet power in making a decision no one else knows about. Not the loud kind. Not the kind you shout across a dinner table or scrawl in a dramatic letter. I mean the kind you whisper only to yourself late at night. After months of feeling invisible, I began to prepare. It started with documents, small. Things at first: birth certificate, social security card, the deed copies I still had from the house I sold. I gathered them slowly, carefully, as if they might shatter from being touched. I slipped them into a folder with no label and tucked it between two cookbooks they hadn't touched in years. I made an appointment at the credit union down the street, said I wanted to open a personal account. The woman behind the desk had a soft voice and asked if I needed help setting up online access. I smiled and said no. She smiled back like she was proud of me, though she didn't know why. I didn't need her to. That smile carried me for the rest of the day. Then came the calls. I phoned the lawyer my husband and I had used when we first made our will. I asked if they still had a copy. They did. I asked about making some changes. Quietly, privately, she said, "Of course." I didn't tell anyone. Ha! I just marked the date on a sticky note and hid it inside a paperback mystery on my shelf. I had started to move through the house like a ghost. But not a lost one. Not anymore. More like someone who'd already left. Just making sure she didn't forget anything on her way out. They didn't notice. Not really. They were too caught up in their routines. She was working from home more. Now always on the phone, always sighing loudly. He was always tired, always scrolling. The kids were polite, mostly, but distant, as if my slowness embarrassed them, as if I reminded them of something they didn't want to think about yet. Once, my granddaughter asked if I used to have a job. I told her I was a school secretary for 28 years. She blinked and said, "Oh, like a receptionist." I nodded and didn't bother correcting her. That was the day I realized how little of me they actually knew. I had been reduced to a set of inconveniences, medication times, dietary needs, occasional bills. No stories, no legacy. Just maintenance. But I was more than that. I had been loved once, fiercely. My husband had adored me in the way quiet men do, through actions. He fixed my car in the rain. He left notes inside my books. He made a shelf. Just for my baking pans, even though I baked only at Christmas. He used to say, "You keep this family stitched together. Don't ever think you're just the thread." I remembered that now. Often. I started going for walks again, short ones, just around the block. I timed them for when they were all out or busy. I'd walk slowly, letting the sun hit my face, pretending for a few minutes that I was still someone they respected. I stopped, asking to be included. That was part of it too, the final unraveling. I no longer asked about dinner plans. I no longer offered to help with chores. I didn't remind them about my doctor appointments or ask for rides. Began calling for my own transport. Paid for my own card. It felt like putting bricks back beneath my feet. Every little thing I did on my own became a stone in the foundation. I was quietly rebuilding. The day I packed the bag was the day I knew I wasn't coming back. It was navy blue, medium-sized, the kind of bag that doesn't draw attention. I folded 3 outfits, 1 warm sweater, pair of walking shoes, the legal papers, the USB drive with the documents, the notebook, everything else. The things they bought me, the things that tied me to this version of my life, I left untouched. I remember sitting on the bed with the bag zipped at my feet, listening to her upstairs on a video call, laughing, talking about her upcoming trip, saying it would be nice not to worry about anyone else for a change. I smiled at that. I had already booked the room at the motel across town. Just 2 nights to start, enough to get my bearings, to let the quiet settle, to hear myself think in a space that didn't treat me like background noise. The room had a single bed, a small desk, and a window that looked out at nothing special, but it was mine. I checked in under my full name. I stood there a while after the door clicked shut, just breathing. No one knew where I was. No one was asking. That night, I laid down and listened to the quiet hum of the air conditioner. It wasn't luxurious, but it was honest. No one upstairs walking over my ceiling. No laughter that excluded me. No whispered plans about where to put me next. Just stillness. And I realized something I hadn't said out loud, not even to myself until that moment. They didn't want me. Not really. Not the real me. Not the thinking, remembering, planning woman. I had always been. They wanted the version of me that stayed out of the way, didn't ask questions, didn't notice things. And that version? She was gone. I wasn't angry. I wasn't heartbroken. It's by something quieter, something steadier. I was sure that I didn't owe anyone the pieces of me they'd already thrown away. Sure that leaving wasn't petty. It was survival. I left a note. Not because I owed them anything, but because I didn't want them to call hospitals. I didn't want to give them the gift of panic, the chance to pretend they cared more than they had. The note was short. I wrote it on the back of an old shopping list, the kind she used to tape on the fridge with magnets shaped like fruit. It said, "I'm safe. I've gone somewhere I can breathe. Don't look for me." Mary left it on the bed, folded neatly beside the pillow, and walked out while the house was still asleep. The morning was gray and quiet. The street lights were still blinking, as if unsure whether it was morning yet. I carried the bag in, one hand, the cane in the other. I didn't look back. I took the bus to towns over and checked into the motel again. A different room this time, facing the back parking lot. Less light, more privacy. It suited me. The first hour was hard. I kept listening for footsteps overhead, for the voice of a child calling Grandma, for the sound of someone asking where the sugar was. But there was none of it. Only silence and my own breath, and the low thrum of traffic beyond the curtain. I lay on the bed fully clothed and stared at the ceiling. I didn't feel brave. I felt like a woman who had finally told the truth. Not to them, to herself. They had been stealing from me. Not just money, but time, space, dignity. I had given them everything. My savings, my memories, my trust. And they had used it to build a version of life that didn't include me. And now it was gone. Not missing, not lost. Gone by choice. That afternoon, I walked to a small diner nearby and ordered soup and coffee. The waitress called me ma'am and smiled at me like I was a real person. It felt strange and beautiful. I sat there for a long while, watching the cars go by. A little girl outside was blowing bubbles and laughing so hard she fell down. Her mother picked her up gently. It hurt to watch. It reminded me of the things I used to do, and the tenderness I once gave so freely. Back at the motel, I opened my notebook and read back what I'd written. It didn't feel like a list of complaints. It felt like a ledger of survival. She used my medication history to say I was forgetful. He changed the insurance documents without telling me. They laughed when I asked to join the family portrait. I had names, dates, emails. I had saved screenshots of transactions and audio messages I was never meant to hear. I wasn't planning revenge. I was simply keeping a record of what had been. Done in silence. And I had already taken the first step. That inheritance money was mine. Every penny. My sister had left it to me in her will, handwritten and notarized. I had been saving it for emergencies. And what was this, if not that? They had dipped into it quietly. A new refrigerator here, a remodel there. Please, with my name. Somewhere in the background, I had let it happen. Not out of ignorance, out of hope. Hope that if I gave them enough, would become valuable again. But love doesn't work like that, and neither does freedom. I took my laptop out and logged into the bank account, the one in my name only. The transfer had gone through. The balance sat there untouched, like a quiet promise. I exhaled. Not relief, not joy, just spaced. The next morning, I bought a burner phone from a corner store and sent one text. It went to my son. It read, "Check. The account? I know everything. Please don't contact me." I turned the phone off after that. I never turned it on again. I imagined the moment he saw it, his face falling, her confusion turning sharp. The questions that would come tumbling out of their mouths, the blame, the stories they'd tried to spin. She's irrational. She's unstable. She must be sick. She must be angry. No, I wasn't angry. I was done. Let them scramble. Let them call banks and lawyers and friends, trying to piece together how they lost their safety net. Let them wonder how long I had known. Let them reread their own messages. Now with different eyes. I didn't owe them an explanation. They gave me none when they started pushing me out of the family. They said I belonged to. They made choices. I made one. The motel room became a small kind of peace. I began each day with coffee. I brewed myself, slow and quiet. I bought a notebook just for poems. I wrote one that began, "I am not a shadow. I am the light that leaves when uninvited." I found a library 2 blocks away, signed up for a card using my license and the motel's address. No one questioned it. I checked out 3 books. One of them was about women who disappear on purpose. That made me smile. I had no plan beyond the week, just a decision, and sometimes that's enough. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard a siren in the distance. Someone else's emergency, not mine. For once, I didn't imagine anyone calling my name, and that silence felt like safety. It didn't take long for the panic to start. On the 3rd morning, the motel phone rang. I let it ring until it stopped. A few minutes later, the woman at the front desk knocked gently on my door. I opened it halfway. She handed me a small note with a number written in blocky pen. "Your son called here," she said kindly. "Asked if you were all right." I thanked her, closed the door, sat back down at the little round table by the window. I didn't call him back. Instead, I turned on the burner phone just long enough to see the messages flood in. "Where are you? Are you okay? Why would you do this? Call me, please. We're worried. The kids are asking." And then, later, "I can't believe you'd just disappear like that. You drained the account. What are you thinking? We need to talk now." I scrolled slowly. The language changed from concern to confusion to something sharper. "This is really selfish. After all we've done for you. We had plans. You've ruined everything." I turned the phone off again and placed it face down. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about the money. They were worried about the hole I'd left behind, not the space I'd lived in. It's strange how people show you the truth when they think they've lost control of the story. She posted something on social media the next day. A photo of the kids with a vague caption about family being complicated and some people not knowing how good they have it. I saw it through a friend's public browser. I wasn't connected to them anymore. I had quietly unfriended them months ago. But the internet still lets you spy if you want to. I didn't feel rage. I just felt tired. They were already rewriting the story, casting themselves as confused victims, painting me as irrational, forgetful, vindictive. But I had all the receipts in a small motel room drawer, inside a manila envelope. I had copies of every transfer, every message, every moment they dismissed me. If they ever tried to challenge what I'd done, I would not have to defend myself with words. Had paper, dates, numbers, facts. But more than that, I had clarity. They didn't miss me. They missed the version of me that served their needs. And now that she was gone, they didn't know what to do. That week, I got a voicemail from my daughter-in-law. I played it once in the dark before deleting it. It was short. "You need to call us. This is getting out of hand. The kids are worried. You don't want to make this worse." Worse than what? Worse than being erased? Worse than being used? Worse than being told with sighs and shrugs and strategic forgetfulness that your presence is tolerated but never truly welcomed? I sat with that question for a while. It was like waiting out a storm you knew wouldn't last, but also knowing when it passed, the air would be clearer. I began writing a letter, not to send, just for myself. It started like this: "You treated me like I was lucky to live in your house. But it was you who were lucky to be given my presence, my history, my help. You took and called it generosity." I wrote for hours. It became a kind of release, a quiet, controlled burn. I wrote about the time I heard her say I wouldn't last another year, how they spoke about options when they thought I was asleep, how they joked about changing the locks once I was settled elsewhere, like a misplaced lamp. I wrote about the meals eaten without me, the decisions made without my voice, the birthdays that passed with only a text. I wrote about the woman I had been, and how she disappeared piece by piece under their roof until the only thing left was a body with no say, no place, and no past. And then I wrote about the moment I realized I didn't have to ask for permission to be whole again. I finished the letter and folded it, slipped it into my notebook. I didn't need to send it. I had already lived it by the end of the week. The call stopped. They must have realized I wasn't coming back. Or maybe they just gave up. Either way, the silence that followed was not painful. It was clean, like a room freshly emptied. The end of a long, unnecessary conversation. I used that silence to make a few more calls. I transferred the utilities I still had in my name. I removed myself from any joint services. I notified the lawyer to finalize the new version of my will, one that didn't include them. I updated my emergency contact to a longtime friend who had once told me, "If you ever need a place to land, call me." I hadn't called her yet. I wasn't ready for company. But I liked knowing someone in the world still saw me as a person, not a burden. I began to look at small apartments. Just a studio. Nothing fancy. A place with a window and a kettle and a lock that only I had the key to. I'd start over. Not big, not loud. Just mine. They called me petty for leaving. They called me selfish for taking what was mine. But they never called me loved. And now they don't get to call me anything at all. The new apartment wasn't much. One window facing a parking lot, linoleum floors that curled at the corners, and a bathroom mirror that had seen better days. But when I turned the key and stepped inside, it felt like freedom. I'd paid 6 months' rent in advance. Quietly. In full, the landlord looked surprised. He asked if I was downsizing after retirement. I just said something like that, and he nodded like he understood. There was no furniture at first, just a mattress on the floor and a small folding table I bought from a second-hand shop. I made coffee with an old kettle I found at a church sale, drank it, standing by the window, watching strangers go about their day. None of them knew me. None of them carried my history. And that strangely brought me comfort. There is something healing about being anonymous. No one watching. No one measuring. Just air. Just time. I bought a plant, a small one, green, with thick, waxy leaves. I put it on the windowsill and watered it in silence. I liked watching it reach for light. A quiet reminder that things still grow, even when no one is cheering them on. The first week in that apartment, I barely spoke. Not because I was sad, because I was full. So much had been said in my silence, in my absence, that I didn't need to explain myself to anyone. I didn't need to narrate my every move like I had in their house, trying to justify my existence. With updates and politeness, I didn't miss them. I missed the idea of them. The version of family I once believed in, where love was unconditional and age was honored. But that version had never existed, at least not in the way I hoped. What they offered wasn't love. It was management. a carefully rationed kindness that came with rules and expiration dates. I had to earn my place at their table. And the moment I needed too much or asked too often, they began to rearrange the seating plan without me. I went to the grocery store one afternoon and picked out everything I liked. Things she used to say were too salty, too expensive, not worth the calories. I bought 3 jars of marmalade because I wanted to. I bought crackers that crumbled to easily and bread that wasn't gluten-free. I bought a chocolate bar and ate the whole thing on the walk back. No one scolded me. No one sighed. No one took a photo to send in a group chat titled Her Habits. It was quiet. It was mine. I started keeping a list of small joys. Not because I was trying to be poetic, just because I didn't want to forget that life still had flavor. That even after everything, I could still feel good. Warm socks out of the dryer. The sound of rain on the window. The way the kettle whistles a little before it boils. How good marmalade tastes at midnight. The feeling of locking the door behind me and knowing no one else had a key sometimes. I'd get a flicker of a memory, my son in his little pajamas running down the hallway with a toy airplane. The way he used to sit in my lap, hand resting on mine like it was the safest place in the world. Those memories used to break me now. They just pass through. I don't fight them. I don't cling. They are what they are. Moments, not promises, not debts, just pieces of a time when I believed everything I gave would come back to me. But life doesn't always work like that. People don't always stay who they were. And love, once twisted into convenience, doesn't untwist just because you wish it would. They haven't called in weeks. The silence used to feel heavy. Now it feels clean. I saw their Christmas photo online. Her mother was in it, sitting in the chair I once used, wearing the necklace I thought I'd lost. Everyone was smiling. Even the dog. I looked at the photo for a long time, not because I was sad. It's because I needed to be sure that I wasn't missing anything worth breaking for. And today I wasn't. Let them fill the house with new alliances. Let them tell their version of events at dinner tables I will never sit at again. Let them roll their eyes and call me bitter. Let them say she was always a little dramatic. Let them whisper what happened to her. Let them, I am not a ghost. I am a woman who left, who packed a bag, closed a chapter, reclaimed her name. There is no monument to that kind of decision. No applause, no parade, just quiet mornings and steady breath. But that's enough. It has to be. I water my plant. I open the window when the air feels kind. I talk to the neighbor's cat who sits on the fire escape like he owns the city. And when I lay down at night, I don't worry if someone will knock or sigh. We'll check to see if I remembered to turn off the light. The light is mine, so is the dark dot. So is the silence, so is the space I now live in uninvited. Unbothered and fully mine. I hadn't planned on seeing anyone from that life again, not in person. Not after all the doors I had closed. But life doesn't always ask for permission before circling back. It was a Thursday, overcast, quiet. I was walking back from the post office with a few envelopes in hand. Bills. A letter to my lawyer. A card I'd written to an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years. My coat was zipped up to my chin, my shoulders tucked against the wind. That's when I saw him, my son. He was across the street, standing beside a silver car I didn't recognize, phone in hand, looking like he wasn't sure what he'd do if he actually found me. He didn't see me at first. I stepped back into the doorway of a bakery and watched him scan the block like he was lost. He looked older than I remembered. Not in the hair or the skin, in the way he stood. Nervous, smaller, and then he looked up. His eyes landed on mine. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just froze, like he couldn't believe I was real. I could have turned away, could have let the crowd blur between us, but I didn't. I stood still, let him walk across the street, let him stand a few feet from me with his hands buried in his coat like a boy about to confess something. "Hi," he said softly. I nodded. Waited. He looked down at the sidewalk, then back at me. "You're okay. I wasn't sure. You just disappeared." I said nothing. He shifted. We didn't know what happened. "You didn't say anything." I raised an eyebrow. Then said, finally, "I said enough." His eyes flickered. There was a long silence. Kind that fills every space you've never had the courage to speak inside. "You took everything." He said quietly, "No, I took what was mine." That made him flinch. He looked like he wanted to argue. But something held him back. He reached into his pocket, pulled out an envelope. Held it out like an offering. "I don't know if this makes a difference, but we didn't mean for it to get so bad. We thought we were helping. I didn't take the envelope. You thought keeping me small was help." His face folded, not all at once, in layers, like someone realizing they'd lost a language they used to speak fluently. "I didn't come here to fight," he said, God, "because I'm not offering that either." He looked at the envelope again, then tucked it back into his pocket. "The kids ask about you sometimes, do they?" "Yeah, Lily drew you last week. Said you looked like a storybook lady." I almost smiled at that. Almost, but I said nothing. We stood there in the cold for another long moment. He cleared his throat. "I'm sorry, Mom." "For what?" He blinked at. "For not seeing you," I added. "For thinking I belonged to the walls and not the family. For letting her speak for both of you while you stayed quiet in the next room." His jaw moved. But no sound came out. "You can't be sorry for what you haven't faced." He nodded slowly. "I guess I don't know how to fix it." I took a deep breath. "You don't get to fix it. You get to live with it." He stepped back. "I didn't mean I know. You rarely did." That was part of the problem. The wind picked up then. A few leaves skittered. Across the sidewalk, a bus rolled by and hissed at the curb. For a moment, the street felt like a hallway between two lives. "Take care of yourself," I said. He nodded again. Looked like he wanted to say more. But I turned and I walked away. Not out of anger, out of clarity. There is no peace in going back to what broke you, even if it looks different now. Even if it stands across from you with a new voice, a softer plea. Some wounds don't bleed. They echo, and I had no room left. For echoes. Back in my apartment, I took off my coat slowly, hung it by the door, sat at the small table with the plant beside me, and poured a glass of water. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from finality. He had come, he had spoken, and still I felt no pull. That was the surprising part. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times, in dreams, in memory, in quiet rehearsals when the night was too still. But when it happened, it didn't feel like a scene in a story. It felt like a door, one I didn't need to open. Later that evening, I took out my notebook, wrote one sentence in clean, even handwriting. I faced the past, and I did not return to it. Then I lit a small candle and placed it beside the page. The room was quiet, safe. Mine. And for the first time since walking away, I didn't wonder if I'd done the right thing. I knew. I don't speak of them much anymore. Not because I'm angry. It's because I'm done. Some things don't need to be carried forward. Some names don't need to echo down every hallway of your new life. They belong to a chapter that closed, and I am not the kind of woman who keeps rereading what already broke her. I still have the notebook, the one I started in the basement room when my world was shrinking. It sits at the back of a drawer now, soft with use, filled with the truth I once had to prove. I don't look at it often, but I haven't thrown it away. Not out of bitterness, out of remembrance. It's important to remember who you were when no one was looking. That's the version of me I trust now, the woman who wrote it all down in silence. Not to be believed, but so she wouldn't forget. I've built something small and solid here. My apartment is still plain, still modest, but it's filled with little things that matter, not because they're expensive, but because they're mine. A chipped blue mug I found at a thrift store. A scarf I knitted last winter when the power went out and I passed the time by candlelight. A stack of books on the floor because I never bothered to buy shelves. The plant by the window still alive. still reaching a quiet companion in my solitude. I've found a rhythm in my days. There's a cafe 2 blocks away that knows how. Like my tea. I sit there some mornings with the paper and read slowly, underlining poems or phrases that stay with me. A few weeks ago, the owner told me I reminded her of her grandmother strong. She said, but soft around the edges. I smiled and nodded. She doesn't know the weight that compliment carried. How long I went being seen as only the burden. Sometimes. I see families walk by, mothers and daughters, older women being helped across streets by younger hands. I don't look away. I don't compare. I just watch. And then let the moment pass. Jealousy has no place in a soul that has chosen peace. A neighbor down the hall, Mrs. Lewis, knocks on my door every Sunday with an extra scone or slice of cake. She never asks questions, just smiles, tells me what's in it, and leaves it on the counter. Sometimes I write her thank you notes on napkins and slip them under her door. It's not a friendship, not yet, but it's something real, something earned, something kind. That's all I want now. Kindness I don't have to beg for. I haven't heard from them in a long time. No more messages, no more voicemails. No more carefully phrased public posts about estranged elders or ungrateful parents. I imagine they've moved on. Told themselves whatever story helps them sleep. That I was unreasonable. That I overreacted. That I took what wasn't mine. They may even believe it, but I don't live in their story anymore. I live in mine. There's a quiet freedom in disappearing. From the life that refused to hold you with care. A deeper freedom still in building one where your name isn't spoken as a sigh, a burden, or a problem to be solved. A few days ago, I walked to the lake near the edge of town. It's just a small place with muddy banks and cattails swaying in the breeze. I sat on a worn bench and closed my eyes. Listened to the wind. Let the silence stretch out across the water. I brought a photograph with me. It was one of the few I'd taken from their house. A picture of me when I was 32. Standing in a garden, wearing overalls and holding a hose, sun in my hair, dirt on my knees, smiling without hesitation. Full of a kind of hope I didn't know I'd one day lose. I looked at her for a long time. Then I whispered, "You did your best," and I folded the photo in half, not to destroy it, just to let it rest. I placed it in the lake, watched it float for a few seconds, then sink gently beneath the surface. That was my goodbye. Not to her. Not to the memory, to the part of me that waited too long to leave, to the part that begged for love while handing over the last of her self-worth, to the woman who thought being needed was the same as being cherished. She did her best, and now she rests. I walked home slowly, feeling the weight in my chest shift. Not disappear. Just move into a place where it no longer bruises me. The past didn't vanish, but it no longer sits in my lap. And I no longer carry the question, what if they change? They won't. That's not cruel. It's just true. Some people only see your value when you leave with it. Some only feel your weight when you remove it. Some never saw you at all, only the space you filled, the work you did, the silence you gave them. But I see me now, all of me, and that is enough. This morning I opened a new notebook. Clean pages. No evidence, no records. Just space. On the first page I wrote, "This time, I decide who gets to call me anything else." And I closed the book with steady hands. I made tea, I watered the plant, and I watched the light come through the window like a quiet promise. The end.